G'day guys, welcome to another episode of the Pumped on Property Show. Now this is a nice short sweet one for all of you guys out there that are thinking of buying your first home or your first investment property and want to add a little bit more structure. In this episode, Simon and I talk about 10 different steps from going from creating a plan at the start all the way through to renting your property at the very end of the process and everything in between. We think it's super helpful for those of you just getting started. I wish I had been able to listen to something like this when I was getting started. We wish you all the best, guys, and hope you enjoy this vid. Now, fortunately in life, there's a process to everything, right? And including property investing, and super excited to kind of break down the process that we use when buying investment properties today and go into a little bit more detail. But you know, the first things first is always creating that plan, right? You know, actually putting pen to paper, having those discussions with your mentors, with your support network, and figuring out exactly what we should do. Now, for me, when creating that plan, I'm always sort of looking short-term first and long-term. Well, kind of at the same time in unison with one another, figuring out, okay, well, where do I want to be in the future? So what do I need to do next that's going to get me one step towards where I want to be in the future as well. So without that plan, it can be super overwhelming, right? To figure out what you're supposed to be doing, because there's so many options, there's so many different types of properties, markets, even just investments that you can choose, that it can become really overwhelming. So coming to it with a clear plan just makes it so much easier to sift through all the bullshit and figure out what you should actually be doing. You know, and that plan is really as simple as going, where do I want to be in the future? Like, what type of life do I want to be living? Do I want to spend more time with family, more time working, more time traveling, more time contributing, more time training, more time with my kids? And then, well, what do I need physically? So I think a good starting point for most people is to try and replace your current annual salary, unless you're absolutely balling and making like 500 grand a year, and then that's a little bit more work. But yeah, I think a good starting point is 100K for most people, which will cover the basic living costs of an Australian lifestyle. So the second step is really that painful process of saving a deposit. Man, nothing's harder than saving your first deposit for an investment property, or nothing that I've really gone through. It's just so tempting to spend it on like a holiday, or you almost spend it on a bike. Yeah. I did spend it on an overseas trip. I've seen every single person in my office that's gone for that first property go through that same experience of, I could just like piss off right now and live for like a year in Bali or something like that. Oh, for sure. Like the first one really is the hardest one, because the first time that you've ever been in a position where you've had that much money in a bank account, and as like a younger person, like, you know, the mind starts firing with how many fun activities we could do with that sort of money. So you've got to be really, really focused once you're in that saving a deposit phase. But a lot of people also have their own home maybe. You know, this might be the first investment property, but they might have purchased a home that could have some equity in it as well. You know, and that can be as good as cash sometimes, depending on your financial situation, which might speed it up and put you in a position where you don't have to save that deposit. You know, there's that carrot for the younger investors of like, what could I spend the money on? But a lot of people that we work with are 35 to 45 and just getting started, or even 50, and that's completely cool too. It's less about the carrot and it's more about the war chest for like family or for life, and the what if something happens, I want a buffer. So either way, like there's a reason for either spending or continuing to save that cash, which comes up all the time. But once you've got either that equity or that savings ready to go, then it's time to go talk to the bank, or I would prefer to talk to a broker that can talk to 30 different banks for me and get that pre-approval in place, because there's nothing worse than going to the market, finding something you really like and then figuring out you can't buy it, or looking at $1 million suburb only to find out weeks later that you can only afford 700K. Yeah, I think that's really important to start with, you know, at least some sort of verbal indication from a professional that can say, you know, based on your current situation, you should be able to purchase a property worth this much. And that leads into the fourth part, which is developing the strategy and having that clear indication as to how much money you can actually spend helps in developing the strategy because it narrows the markets that you can focus on. It narrows down the suburbs that you can focus on. It narrows down the type of property that you can focus on, because the reality is we can only do what the banks will enable us to do, right?
100%. You know, for this, I like to start at a high level and go, okay, I've chosen to buy Australia.
Yeah.
Then, you know, look at something like Heron Todd White and look at the different states in Australia and decide which state. And then within that state, Simon and I like to buy the metro markets or the major regional markets because historically speaking, according to CoreLogic, they have outperformed the lower regional markets in Australia. And then once I've gone, okay, Australia, Queensland, Brisbane, then I realised very quickly that Brisbane is actually the same as Sydney and Melbourne and has a city centre, north, south, east and west. So you've got to choose an area within the city. And then within that area, you'll also find that there could be up to 50 or 100 different suburbs, and you've got to reduce it down to a suburb level. Now, as weird as this is to say, like as a data geek, like that is actually my favorite thing to find, that like little needle in the haystack. How you find that is just look for a suburb that has underperformed over the last 10 years. So if, for example, Sydney's gone up by 10% per year for the last 10 years and 9% per annum for the last 40 years, according to Homely, then if there's a suburb like Liverpool, I'm just pulling this out of the air, it's probably done 10% as well, but Liverpool, for example, that's only done 5% a year, relatively speaking, based on Jeremy Shepherd from DSR's data, that suburb has some potential in it. And that's what we do in Brisbane. That's what we used to do in Sydney when we're buying down there as well.
And then we'll look at about another 30 to 40 different key performance indicators to see whether or not it's worth going into, which maybe we'll do another podcast on one day. But, you know, that requires a lot more detail to figure out the suburb that you want to be focusing in. But once you've got to that area, you really do need a list of maybe 5 to absolute 10 suburbs maximum. The lower the number, the better, because then you can really become a specialist in that particular area. You'll then get to build relationships with the local agents in the area. You'll get to understand where the better pockets of that suburb are. You'll get to know where the busy areas are, where the quiet, nice, family-friendly areas of that suburb are, and it will help you figure out the right property to buy. But when you're looking at a lot of different suburbs, a lot of different opportunities, once again, it becomes quite overwhelming. It's kind of like going to the restaurant that's got 100 different things on the menu and it's impossible to figure out what you want, rather than when you go to that awesome restaurant that tells you what you're going to eat and the food's amazing, right? So less is more sometimes in those situations. And during that strategy phase, you really need to figure out the product type that you're going for as well. Now, for Ben and myself, it's always houses. We understand that the power is in the land, and fortunately, CoreLogic did a really good study on this, which looked at the comparison between houses and units in Australia over a 25-year period, and it was shown that houses have outperformed units by 96% over the last 25 years in Australia. So for me, I'm going to go for the asset type that has worked the best in the past, because I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel here. I'm just trying to get the best return on my investment.
I love that, man. So once we've got the market nailed and the suburb and the property type, then before we jump in, which I know is what everyone wants to do, we want certain parts of our team of advisors sorted out, because you're going to need them very quickly. So as an absolute minimum, you really want a solicitor that can check the contract and protect you through the process, as well as a building and pest inspector. Clients of ours, we also introduce to town planners, accountants, tax depreciation specialists, property managers, and everybody in between, because I think due diligence is one of the pieces that I didn't do very well when I was buying my first 5 or 6 properties. And by the solicitors and the building and pest inspectors and the property managers doing their appropriate searches, it not just protects your ass, but it also gives you that peace of mind that not only have you got the plan right and you've got the property type and the city right, but you've also, once you've bought the property, you can sleep at night knowing that a whole bunch of professionals that do that for a living have looked at it, and hopefully they've got your best interests at heart.
And then you can move into the sixth step, which is actively looking. You can start actively looking at the market and actively reaching out to local real estate agents, because you know when you find the right property, you're going to have to take some action. And you've already got your plan, you've already got your suburbs, you've already got your team there ready to support you once you've done it. So this is the fun part, right? This is where we're looking on realestate.com and Domain. We're calling the highest performing local agents in the area, which you can find them through resources like Rate My Agent or On the House, and they will actually give you, how many properties that particular agent sells every single year. Now, in our opinion, the person that sells the most in that suburb is generally the top performer. You give them a call and say, hey, have you got any off or pre-market listings coming up? Here's my goals, here's my budget. This is the type of property that I'm looking for. I'd love to gain access to some of those off and pre-market listings, just to give yourself an extra few days ahead of the general public when making those decisions. Because right now, we are seeing a lot of areas around Australia outside of Sydney and Melbourne increase in value, meaning that they are hot markets at the moment, and we don't always have that time to decide whether or not we want to purchase a property over a number of days, because they sell really quickly. So that's why it's so important to do the preparation work before you start actively looking, so that when the right property comes up, you're ready to take action.
100%, man. And then from there, the 7th and 8th steps are actually to go buy that property. And the reason I say together is because as soon as you've bought, you want to immediately start that due diligence process with the solicitor, with the town planner, building and pest inspector, property manager, and whoever else you need to be able to sleep at night. And, the way to find those guys, you could ask for a referral from a friend. If you're working with a buyer's agent like ours, then we'll introduce you to some good people. You can choose to work with them or go find someone else. Or good old Google has a pretty good ranking algorithm. I know people can game it, but normally the businesses that want to be at the top invest in Google and they get to the top, and hopefully you can find a good partner. Most importantly, it's about checking in with those guys. So I ring my property manager or my solicitor, my building and pest inspector to figure out what's going on, my mortgage broker every single week during that settlement process until it's comfortably gone all the way through.
Yeah, I think at that point in time, it's, doing the necessary work to just keep your mind at ease, because this is a very stressful point in time when you're signing that dotted line and committing to purchasing that property and moving through that settlement phase. This is where all of the challenges that you've faced in the past, all of the things that have held you back in the past are going to be at their highest. It's going to be the scariest point in time. Still to date, I get shit scared at this point in time. I don't like it. I don't like the way that it feels, but if you have done the right preparation and if you really lean on your team of advisors, and if you've, number one, got that great team of advisors, it makes it a hell of a lot easier to make sure that everything moves through nice and smoothly and as simple as it possibly can, and just get rid of some of those stresses that a lot of people could have. When you don't create that plan and prepare for all of these things, that's when those stresses and those challenges are going to come up the most. So just give this stuff the time it deserves at that point, and make sure that you're reading the emails, you're checking in with your team of advisors, that you are, making sure that each and every next step is being taken care of.
100%, bro. And then we get to, cool, I've settled on the property. Now I've got to find a tenant. Again, you can find great managers through referrals or through your buyer's agent or through like a realestate.com or a Google, and all you want is market value, and you want to make sure that your property is protected. So you've got your insurance in place as soon as you've bought the property, and then your manager is looking after that. You want to make sure the place is compliant, that there's no red flags in the property that could catch you in the future, and that it's in as good a condition as you're willing to put it in. So for me, I like to buy a tenant-ready, lower maintenance home these days, after having some tenant issues in the past where I was just getting a call or an email every second week. It felt like asking me to fix stuff. And then once you've got your management sorted out, then we move to reviewing what we've done, taking a breath, because as Simon said, like the process can be a bit stressful and it can bring a lot of stuff up. And then going back to step one and going, what is my bigger picture plan? I've ticked off this step. Maybe the next step is just to take 2 years to recover, to save some money and to get some equity if the market goes up. Or maybe it's hey, like I feel good, I've bought that property, I've built my confidence, I've built my team, and I'm ready to take the action step number 2. And we go through the same cycle again and again until we achieve what we want to achieve.
Love it. It's pretty clear, crystal clear plan just broken down there. And, this is what makes our heart beat, right? Like, I absolutely love this sort of stuff. I like every single step of the process, except for maybe saving up those deposits. That's always a little bit of a heartache, a little bit boring, but a necessary evil to get to where we want to be. So thanks so much for taking us through all of those different steps. And please share this video with somebody who is looking to purchase their first investment property sometime soon, or if somebody is unfamiliar with the process, please share this video so they're doing the necessary work to put themselves into a position where they can actually get the best possible result. We also run a buyer's agency where we help a small number of people each and every month purchase investment properties in the Brisbane market. Now, if you're somebody that is looking to purchase an investment property within the next 6 months, then we'd love to offer you a strategy session over at pumpedonproperty.com, where you can follow those free strategy session links to book something in with either myself, Simon, my brother Ben, or one of the team members, where we'll talk about exactly where you're at right now and where you want to be in the future. We'll help you create your plan. We'll help you understand the ins and outs of the market and point you in the right direction as to what your next step should be. And then you can take that and go and absolutely smash it yourself. Or, as I said, become one of those small number of people that we work with, and we can hold your hand through that process. But either way, I hope you've enjoyed today's video, guys, and please go out there and invest safely.
Woo!
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
That's cool, bro. Yeah. Oh, sweaty. So sweaty. Oh, that's good. Look at that. So nice, eh? Oh.